Call to order the October meeting of the Ann Arbor Downtown Development Authority.
We'll do a roll call. Bob Gunzel.
Here.
Roger Hewitt.
Here.
Bree Clough. Here. Jill Lowenstein. Here. Al McWilliams.
Here.
John Moa.
Here.
Rishi Narayan.
Here.
Keith Orr.
Here.
Steve Powers.
Here.
Sandy Smith. John Split.
Here.
Bill Weiss.
Here.
We do have a quorum.
Okay. Thank you. First up is audience participation. We have a maximum of 4 people for 4 minutes each, and first person signed up is Peter Allen.
I've got about 8 or 10 slides. Good afternoon, Peter Allen's my name. Thank you very much. Nice to see a lot of familiar faces. There you go, start right there. Thank you, Ed. I want to make an appeal to you all about the alleys, particularly the alley that's next to the Kingsley Lane, 121 Kingsley West development. It's a development between Tom Fitzsimmons and Mark Berg and myself. After 15 years of trying to make this work, it's off to a great start. There are 20 units, there are 19 sold. It's going to raise the taxes, well over $10 million. There's going to be well over $100,000 a year that goes to the DDA when this is complete, about a year from now. These are the other projects that Tom is doing in the near north side around Carytown. Next, please. This is as of an hour ago. Framing is going up. People begin to move in third quarter next year. Yes. And should all be done by the end of next year. So we'd like to get on your agenda for redoing that alley the first quarter of 2017. There are a couple of public policy issues that I want to make. Next, please. So that you can see the green building in the background, the existing building where Mark Berg had his office for 20 years. That's the alley. The alley is not really in bad condition. I want you to note how many parking lots there are up and down this alley. This is not like a lot of alleys in downtown with a lot of commercial and restaurant properties. It's a very residential neighborhood and a very residential street, but they're commercial properties. Keep going, Ed. Along North Main that have their surface parking lots behind. When we talked to you about this, back before the Great Recession, 2006, we talked about some sort of cooperative effort and maybe getting all the neighbors to cooperate in something quite fancy. We think that because of the nature of this area, next please, this ought to be a alley that is not so much a service alley, but that's a pedestrian walking alley, as well as allowing for the vehicles. Certainly there'll be some dumpsters, next please. But there's just asphalt everywhere. This is the new spa that's going in across the street from 320 North Main. They just very carefully disassembled those buildings. Next please. This is the building behind the old JJR building. Again, 11 o'clock in the morning, a number of vacant spaces. Next building, or next. And I think that's the worst condition of the alley that I've seen, so I think it's not just a huge expense, but I'm not in that business, so I can't say how much it's going to be. And last slide. There's second to last slide. Next one. Again, everybody's got a surface lot, and I lied. Here's the last slide, right there. So that's behind the Ann Arbor Area Foundation. Again, at 11 o'clock, 30–40% of their spaces are vacant. So I think what's going to happen is that these air rights, this development potential along this alley the next couple of years, as Tom has begun to tap the need for downtown housing, we see how robust it is. We sold all our units before we broke ground. I think you're going to see these other houses begin to look at what do we do with this very valuable site, our space behind. The highest and best use is not to park cars, it's to build something. It'll be probably somewhat of a mixed use with a residential component, something maybe retail or office at the main level. But I see over time that these lots are going to be converted. The last point I want to make is that I'm going to give you a compliment. I think what the DDA has done over the last 20–30 years in recreating our downtown is having an enormous impact that you might not recognize. I teach real estate to about 100 students every year over at the U of M, and I have them rank their favorite cities to move to when they move out. And this year, for the first time ever, Ann Arbor and Detroit outranked New York and Chicago for a place where graduates want to live. And that's a testament to creating place, a testament to creating multimodal, bike shares, car shares, sidewalk amenities, exciting the sidewalk, restaurants and retail spilling out. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Okay. We have no one else signed up, but we do have 3 more slots. Would anyone else like to address the board? Okay. Seeing none, we will go on to the next. Reports from city boards and commissions. Ray Detter with the Downtown Area Citizens Advisory Council. Right?
I have 2 things I want to talk about today. At last night's meeting, we covered these. 2 items. First, the Downtown Ann Arbor Historical Street Exhibit Program. Would like to encourage everyone to attend a very special dedication on North University and State on Tuesday, November 10th, 2015. You have invitations in front of you. We will gather at 5:00 p.m. around the exhibits on the sidewalk planters of North University to dedicate our final 4 historical street exhibit displays on the theme of town and gown in Ann Arbor. I think I passed these out a few months ago, but they are a book lover's town, music, 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 remembering Drake's, the University Musical Society, and the May Festival. Eleanor Tibbles, who is the daughter of Truman and Mildred Tibbles, who used to own Drake's, will precede a line of very distinguished speakers for that event with flute renditions of popular 20th century music. Eleanor happens to be a very significant flutist who also plays with the San Francisco Symphony. And she's flying in with a friend for the occasion. Donors, invited guests, including members and staff of the DDA, will then walk across State Street to festive celebration with hors d'oeuvres, drinks, music, and dance in the historic Nichols Arcade. And I will say this is only the 2nd time in history that the Nichols Arcade has been allowed a party to take place in that particular location. We feel quite honored by that. While these, of course, these will be the last exhibits to be installed, the 28-year-old program will continue and develop with more student and weekend public tours and new and innovative ways of reaching out to all citizens and visitors in Ann Arbor with regard to our history. And also, next year, we hope to make it interactive so that when you come up with a cell phone, it'll talk to you. But that's one of the things that we're going to be doing in the future. The second thing is, in July past, I reported to you on City Council approved changes to earlier zoning mistakes in the D1 character area of East Huron and East End. In September, I reported to you on contemplated changes of the Planning Commission's Ordinance Revision Committee on future granting of premiums and possible strengthening of the effectiveness of the city's design review board. And I want to report that these changes are already having a positive effect on future downtown development. For the last 2 weeks, 2 members of the Citizen Advisory Council, 4 residents of the Old Fourth Ward Association, and 3 residents of Sloan Plaza on Huron have been meeting with the architect and new core group owners of the parking lot between Dahlman's former Campus Inn, which has now been sold to AJ Capital, Graduate Hotels, and Sloan Plaza. Our object with them is to work out a design for the new apartment building that is going to be constructed on that site, and they want to start next year. They invited us to these meetings. We met twice already. We'll have another meeting this week, and we're already producing designs which are acceptable within the zoning which has been proposed, which they're very eager to do, including a diagonal of 130 feet and restricting it to 120 feet in height. Eric Grimm, the Senior Vice President of Core Spaces, and his architects, John Majewski, are setting a really high cooperative standard for the way new development should take place in Ann Arbor. They sought us out to join them in helping design a new building that would meet the requirements of our new zoning. And we, in turn, gave them a list of our neighborhood committee goals for the project. I don't have the time to list those goals, but they were receptive, and so far they've been meeting every one of the goals that we want with regard to that project, at the same time satisfying their needs with regard to how it's going to produce money. But it's going to be a very good development, and some of the drawings are already emerging. So we're looking forward to having something really significant on that site that everyone thinks is a good project. Thank you.
Next.
That's me. Hi, I'm David Santa Croce. I'm the chair of the Public Markets Advisory Commission. Because I don't know how to say no, I'm also the chair of the Parks Advisory Commission, which kind of sits above the Public Markets Commission in many ways. I'm also a 15-year Carytown resident. I've lived within 100 yards of the market for that long. I'm here to talk to you about a proposed new structure on the what's called the Sandlot, which is here. Right, this is Detroit Street. This is 4th. That's a proposed new structure. A new structure on this site has been talked about for years. The primary motivation is the winter. No one wants to go in the winter because it's freezing. People who now, and there's been a rapid increase in the production of produce and other kind of summer vegetables, but they can't come because they can't keep them from freezing. It's very difficult. We over the last, I think on the commission for 5 years now, we have made some attempts to explore some sort of winterization of the current structure. They all failed miserably. There's just no way to do it. So the answer that we have now are left with is a new building. So what we're proposing is that new building. It's kind of a 3-season building, meaning it'll never get much above 50 degrees, even in the worst weather. It provides 40, so right now the Sandlot, in the good weather, provides 18 uncovered stalls. The building will provide 42 new summer stalls, so that's 42 additional vendors. We have a vendor list that well exceeds what's there. It also provides a space for 30 winter vendors. So now we will have a market that's a legitimate market during the winter, not people running through freezing. As you all know, I certainly know as a neighbor, the existence of that market, particularly when it's thumping during the good weather, it lends a vibrancy to the neighborhood and all the attendant shops, both in Carytown but also working back up 4th Avenue. We'd like to see that continue. Thus far, the budget for this building, between site work, construction, and architect fees, is about $833,000. The market, the Public Markets Advisory Commission, the Public Markets used to be have its own bank account, was its own enterprise organization. That got changed for some reasons a year, now 2 ago, but we got to keep our savings account. So the market funds we've got $350,000. There's $100,000 coming from a millage. There's $129,000 coming from developer contributions. That leaves us short $254,000.06 or something like that. That's what we're here asking the DDA to consider in its planning, whether they would be willing to help support the construction of this new building, which again I think will really transform the vibrancy of this neighborhood to make it more equivalent to what you see in the good weather when the market is, when you don't have to freeze to go to the market. That was under 4 minutes. You got any questions?
I'm curious as to what the organizational structure of the market is. Is it's each vendor is its own separate business? I understand that.
Yes.
But is there an umbrella organization? Is that what your council?
The enterprise, it used to be an enterprise fund, so it ran kind of like a business owned by the city.
The umbrella organization.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, okay.
Now we're just kind of on a line item city thing.
I see. I didn't know that.
That's
We're part
what-
of the Parks Department.
We're part of the Parks Department.
Okay.
So we're considered a downtown park. I'm Sarah, I'm the farmer's market manager.
I'm sorry, I should have introduced
That's
you.
okay.
So this will ultimately wend its way up from the Public Markets Advisory Commission to the Parks Advisory Commission.
Ultimately, it'll be city council.
Yes, that's right.
Parks is part of the city organization.
But 254 is what we're short and what we need. Please.
I have another question. Is it anticipated that it will be multi-purpose so that it could be used for events and not just?
Yes, that's right. So the aisles are not fixed, so we can cram more, make them smaller and get more vendors in, up to 42 vendors, 30 vendors in the winter. But in the good weather, the sides open up, and that allows us to put about 42. And again, these are rough numbers. But yeah, that's the idea. But in the winter, you're not going to have a wedding in there in February because it's going to be 50 degrees, right? It's really a 3-season building. To do it at this low cost, it's kind of like a fancy 21st century barn.
I skimmed through this. When would you need the funds? Like what's the time frame for that?
Tomorrow. No,
Yes. Do you have your checkbook with you?
So we would love to be in construction next year if at all possible, but we're also open to the possibility if the DDA is looking at multiple fiscal years going out, being able to fund it in sort of 2 pieces is also an option. So, like we said, we have, over $500,000 ready to go, but in order to complete, we need the rest of the funding as soon as possible.
When you say next year, I assume you construct
Next
not in the
calendar
summer,
year,
but
yeah.
you wouldn't do it in the summer, right? So was it the beginning of the year or end of the
The
year?
idea would hope,
The
the end is
So
to
that's
kind of
fiscal year
do
18.
the hardscape in the fall, and then when it's slow in the winter. The other thing I should mention is we have, and I'm an empiricist. That's what I do for a living. We have done multiple surveys. There's nary a customer who doesn't want to see this happen. The vast majority of vendors would also like to see it happen. There is a small vocal minority who worry about their propriety, particularly along that middle aisle, who worry about whether it's going to change the business model, and we're doing our best to try to be as equitable as possible if this happens, to treat everybody equally. But of course, change makes some people nervous, so we do have a strong vocal minority, small vocal minority out there saying it's not a good idea.
I have lots of questions, but I think other people do as well, and we should probably
Sure.
move this to a committee where we can focus.
Sure, and I'm
on the
always happy to
questions
come
rather
back
than in this setting. Would it
Yeah.
be partnerships would be most appropriate, or?
Why don't we have
or
Susan
capital
make
improvement?
a determination on which committee that should go. Yeah.
And this would also be a project that somewhere prominently we would feature all the participants, right, including the DDA. But now speaking just as a resident, the place is just full of people, and mind you, they block my driveway half the time. But it's full of people in the good weather. It dies in the summer. It's nice in the winter.
People only get 4 minutes.
I didn't hear the buzzer, so you're done.
Thank you,
Okay.
thank you.
Did we decide which committee would be most appropriate? Or do we not have to decide that now?
I think at this point, for what we've heard, I believe it would go to partnerships, but partnerships, I've sort of shared with them the delay. We still have work ahead of us as far as creating the grant guidelines.
Right.
So that's likely where it will go when we are ready for it.
Okay. All right, very good.
Thank you. DDA members' communications. I think we'd like to use this opportunity for anyone. Yeah, I was going to say, for anyone who was at the IDA conference.
Okay, sorry, I thought you were.
Yeah, no. Anyone who was at the IDA conference and might want to share some things.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Last week, a number of us were at the International Downtown Association meeting, and it was in San Francisco. And interestingly, the focus of it was very different from other IDAs that we've been to, in that there was a lot of discussion about homelessness issues and housing equity and those kinds of things. I did not go to many of those sessions, but I'll let other people talk about that kind of thing if they'd like to. I just wanted to just outline some of the things that I did attend. One was defining, strengthening, and communicating place-based identity, and this focused on the Chicago Loop Alliance and kind of what they were doing, and a lot of what they were doing that we can relate to here. They have a lot of alleyways. We just heard about possibly doing a new alleyway, and they have a lot of alleys that they wanted to invigorate in some way, so that 6 times a year they have a program called Activate, where they open up the alleys. They have craft beer that's given for free, and that brings a lot of people. And art. It's also a way of showing off public art in those things, and so I thought that was very interesting. And they also, the side benefit is that they hand out surveys to people who are coming to these events so that they can track a lot of who's coming downtown and get information that way. I went to something called New Approaches to Developing Downtown Real Estate, which was a huge project in downtown San Francisco involving where the San Francisco Chronicle building is, and it's 4 acres owned by the Hearst Corporation. It's being developed by a group called Forest City, and they're going through this incredible redevelopment there on this 4-acre site, where they are going to have 1.4 million square feet of office, residential, and retail space, 698 units of new housing, open space, renovation of 3 historic buildings. Interestingly, the way they developed this was with community benefit agreements negotiated between the developer, the community members, and the city. Now, given this zoning, they said to get all the zoning permits, this takes between 5 and 7 years. They're now in year 7 of getting the zoning permits for this, so we can feel a little bit better about how long it takes us to get zoning in Ann Arbor. But there's $1.9 million that's being given by the developer for operating and programming endowment for their Community Arts Stabilization Trust. I know that's something you'd like to have here, Marie. And they're going to have below market rate arts and cultural office space for displaced art associations. So different art associations that have been displaced in their downtown because of development, they are now giving money back to them. And then this developer will also donate $25 million in transit and pedestrian safety improvements. Now in San Francisco they can get what are called impact fees, so they can get a lot of that, but it's a little food for thought of things that we might think about here. It went to an interesting discussion on community innovations and community policing, and this focused on Billings, Montana, and San Diego, California, where they had a problem with chronic inebriation of people downtown. And so they focused on task forces that worked on a continuum of care, increasing community policing, but also working on the whole continuum of care, including housing for people who were chronically inebriated downtown. Then the last one was the university downtown, which was a group of people from different university communities, and the speakers were people from Berkeley, Boulder, and Tempe. And that was interesting to relate to our community, where in a couple of places at least they have a lot of cooperation from the university, namely in Berkeley and Tempe. Boulder is essentially kind of far removed from the university, and so even though we often compare ourselves to Boulder, Boulder is more of a little downtown for exquisite rich people, and their university doesn't participate a whole lot in what they do. The group is talking about forming a subgroup in IDA for college towns, and so that's something that we'll keep our eye on. It certainly would be a great thing for us to participate in.
Thanks, Joan.
Yes, I got a couple of things on there. Joan did a good job of giving an overview of some of the sessions, but a couple of quick things. I went on a walking tour with representatives from Oakland and Berkeley, so it was interesting to just walk the streets and see what's going on. Berkeley in particular, I guess a few things that jump out is that their focus has been on the arts, invigorating their downtown. They were actually a much more beleaguered downtown than I had realized before, and it's still signs of that. So they're in a little bit of a different situation historically than we are, but still there's some interesting things. I mentioned they have an ambassador program, which seems to work quite well. The relationship with the university, as Joan said, I think seems to be fairly strong. They're developing their art museum and film institute in town, and kind of taking it off campus and putting it in town. So there are just some interesting dynamics there. But I would say that, my takeaway was we're doing pretty darn well. There are a lot of things that are lacking there, a lot of things they're not focusing on that we are focusing on. Their focus is mainly on the arts and on work share program, trying to business incubator type work. The main thing I came away with was going to sessions about streetscapes, obviously, capital improvements committee. So I've got lots of thoughts and notes that I'll share with that committee when the time comes. So please come to our next committee meeting.
I would just like to add, since I'm relatively new to the DDA and to downtown Ann Arbor. I thought, I came away being very proud of Ann Arbor because we certainly have similar challenges around the country, but it seems like we're doing an awful lot right here, and it was great to see that. One of the first things that was said that is if you have problems with parking, that's a good problem to have for a city. It means people want to come downtown. And so I felt great about that problem. Now I have a new attitude about how wonderful it is to have a parking problem. I certainly loved the concept and the idea that a lot of cities really engage arts and culture as part of their plan to be a really vibrant city. So I'm proud to be part of the Ann Arbor Arts Center in that capacity. And the last thing is I thought we were doing great with some of our transportation initiatives. I felt like we're doing the bikes, we're working with ATA, and I feel like we are taking on some of those problems. So I feel like we're really on the right track, and I'm really glad I went.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Sure. Yeah, indeed, I think this is my 4th time going to IDA, and indeed many times I find myself in that situation where people are saying, wow, you've got good problems you're worrying about. But the few things I wanted to hit on, one in the university towns, the big smack for us was to discover that California universities pay property taxes. So that was like, wow, a real benefit they have, right? But I also took a walking tour this one of the Barbary Coast, which was very interesting. It's nicely marked and all that, and they had somebody running it. But seeing this and what we do downtown, I mean, a self-guiding walking tour experience here has so much more information than the Barbary Coast one, so that felt really good as well. The one I was really interested in going to was a session on gentrification. And it was kind of interesting because there was, on the pre-conference day on Wednesday, there was actually a protest outside the hotel of people, protesting about what gentrification has done to San Francisco, and you're going to be hearing all these evil ideas at this conference. And of course, as we know, there's good planning and bad planning. It's not planning that's the problem, it's the quality of the planning. It was an interesting session. No one had any magic bullets. There was a lot of talk about one of the ways of being able to convince people that it really is a problem and it has to be addressed. It had to do with some data models that showed how much more vibrant and sustainable a town was that had a diversity of incomes and race, class, and gender. So that was interesting. And among the things, even though, as I said, there was no magic bullets presented, some of the things they talked about are things that we've at least started as a community to talk about as goals as a result of the housing study that was done recently. So, felt like at least we're starting to address this in some of the best ways. Those were my takeaways.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My takeaways were the reminder of the wisdom of our forefathers. I think they were all men back then when Ann Arbor created one of the country's first public parking systems, and the wisdom and the skill of our current generation, Roger and John, and certainly Susan, in managing and overseeing our parking system, and the importance of having an integration approach to parking. And one speaker, I don't think it was our own Susan Paulet, although she did a remarkable job at the sessions you were part of, said you really have to look at a downtown when it comes to traffic and parking almost like an airport, where it's really not just on-street parking, it's not just transit, it's all of those pieces that come into an area, and the speaker made the reference to an airport. Also, the takeaway was the importance of the economic equity issues and the need to be, as a DDA, being part of an effort to work on affordability, on homelessness. And then this last was the takeaway on continuing to be innovative. As the previous board members spoke to, Ann Arbor in many ways is ahead of many places. However, those places are catching up. And if we want to continue to be a desirable location, a place that people are talking about, to continue to look at how we can innovate and and perhaps expand our traditional view of the role of the DDA. Again, looking at how can the DDA be more of an integrated transit parking provider, and how can the DDA help with some of the economic equity issues. One of the speakers talked about a program that Oakland helped fund, where they were providing job training dollars basically to young programmers, so they would have the skills to go and work for Google and the other tech companies that are driving up the costs of housing in the Bay Area, and then leaving so many people behind because they don't have the skills. So I don't know if it was the Oakland DDA or the city of Oakland realized that there are some economic equity issues that needed to be addressed. I encourage us to continue to think about how can we be more aspirational and not only in the weeds on a Southview streetscape, but also looking at what can we do to continue to be a destination of choice.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm bummed I didn't go.
Me too. Okay. All right, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Susan, give your executive director's report.
Sure. I'm going to give you a few dates just to get them on your calendars, just to think about. Ann Arbor IPSC Chamber Impact 2015 is going to take place on the 23rd. Speaking of income inequality, the group is grappling with that needs assessment report and understanding together what we can do about it. And what's exciting about this session is it's got the chamber at the heart of it, so it's a business-centric discussion. Because I think the chamber realizes that if we don't have a variety of incomes in our community, if a variety of people don't live here, that's not good for anybody's prosperity. So October 23rd at 8:30 at the Sheridan. Another meeting to put on your schedule is Thursday, October 22nd from 3 to 5 and 6:30 to 8:30 at the downtown library. The next phase of work on the library lot, we have some preferred developers with proposals that meet the needs that were set forward in the RFP that the city put out. This is a chance for them to hear from the community about things like design and uses, scale, and so forth. Following the meetings on the 22nd, again 3 to 5 and 6:30 to 8:30 at the library, the developers will be given a chance to revise their proposals to make a final and best offer to the city, which will be going to the city at the end of the year, coming November, December. So it's a great opportunity for us to get in close and see what those proposals look like.
What was the dates again?
So that meeting for the library lot is Thursday the 22nd from 3 to 5 or 6:30 to 8:30. And that's at the library multi-purpose room on the 4th floor. So impact, library lot. Another one to put on your radar is the first meeting, for which there will now be many others following, about putting together a master plan for transit in the region. The RTA is going to be here at the DDA office on Tuesday the 20th at 4 o'clock, between 4 and 8. It's going to, I think, have an open house format. They have information that they've developed through needs and there's the needs and the assets and everything you can think of, and they've begun to assemble what could become the threads that come together next fall in a millage request. And they're going to try to tease out from people, do we heavy up on service but then the millage request is heavier? Do we lighten up on the millage request but then the service is lighter? It's a 4-county ask that'll be coming next fall. Washtenaw, Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb County, and the city of Detroit. We're here at the DDA office, and I'm putting it out there for as many people as possible to give them the feedback to find its way to not only concluding a master plan for the region, something that we'll all benefit from, but also then to what might eventually find its way to village language. What's exciting about it is the first time I think we're going to see things like the rail, which has been talked about for years and has not moved forward. How do we connect Ann Arbor to Detroit, maybe along Michigan Avenue? The pieces of the puzzle that make us a region don't exist. And for all of you that were in San Francisco, we take it for granted when you're in a place like that, or when you go to Chicago. There's regional transit, which doesn't exist today. So the 20th here at the DDA between 4 and 8. For myself, I thought I'd just touch on a few of my takeaways. I'm originally from the Bay Area. I lived there through high school, went to school at Santa Cruz, lived there after school. And what struck me was both what had changed and what had not changed. It had always been an expensive place to live, and one of the reasons I moved to Ann Arbor was the quality of life was so much greater for what I could afford as a graduate student. So it wasn't as if it was an easy place to live. What was striking was just how expensive things have become. We heard that they have the highest rents of anywhere in the country, $3,500 a month. And I didn't get into, one bedroom rent. $3,500 is the average rent. And as I was figuring that out, though they are proudly pointing to $15 an hour minimum wage that they've approved at the state, somebody would have to work 55 hours a week for a year to be able to afford just the rent to live there. They haven't paid for the electricity, haven't paid for food. They had just worked 55 hours a week for a year at minimum wage to live there. And at the time I lived there, Haight-Ashbury was just on the way out, but it was still a cool, funky place. You go to the Castro, and it was hot. There were a lot of stuff going on. A lot of the cool, funky people that lived there when I lived there probably don't live there anymore. And what we heard from one of the speakers was the sense of crisis. They feel like their DNA, their essence as San Franciscans is really called into question. Because though the tech wages are rising, everyone else's wages have stagnated. And a lot of the cool and funky parts of the city that we like so well, it's really the people that are the cool, funky parts. It's not the things, it's the people. And they're struggling. And so for me, what I took away was San Francisco is a bellwether for Ann Arbor. And speaking to the chamber in the impact session, we've got to get ahead of it. We heard from at least a couple of them their regret that they didn't, that where they are today, they're struggling now to make up ground. They had half as many building permits for residential units as Seattle, which is also a fabulous place to live, also on the West Coast. But their onerous development practices came about because at the time, they had too much housing and not enough people. So they shaped a lot of their planning around a situation that doesn't exist today. And they let it catch up with them, and it's sort of fallen, it's caught them by surprise. What we did hear that they're doing that's interesting are things like Airbnb down in San Francisco. Quite a few of the people who are able to stay in the cities because they're renting out their couch or sometimes their own apartment just to get some money to help pay some of that rent. And what was interesting about that was hearing about the Airbnb, because we're hearing about tourism and the CBD mergers. It's not damaging the hotels because the stays are happening out in the neighborhoods. People are not choosing to have the typical tourist experience. They want to experience it as we do, as community members. And it's not only putting dollars out into or more broadly being spread through a community, through the neighborhoods, but it's also allowing people to stay in their own homes. So that was an interesting place where silos began to break apart. Tourism is a way to deal with affordability. And on that note, I'll just end with transportation, because we did talk about it. What they are doing well, and what I hope we can do well, is that regional transportation. The service levels are unbelievable. I took a bus on one of the days out to the Golden Gate Bridge. The buses ran every 5 minutes. This is on a Saturday. To connect to another bus, which was running every 5 minutes. And these are the articulated buses, packed with people. No one needed a schedule since the buses ran that often. And it was so easy. It was one of those things where you just sort of take it for granted. So it wasn't just BART carrying us across the East Bay. It was the Muni system, the Caltrans system. They have like 6 different transit systems. We can get there, but we have to set it out there as a goal by breaking down the silos. Affordability, prosperity, transportation, these are all intertwining, and I hope the DDA learns from what we learned and finds a way to break down those things and puts it into actionable projects where we can work toward improving prosperity, improving affordability in our community, and improving connectivity. So those for me were the big ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Okay. Next on the agenda, approval of minutes from the September 2015 meeting. Support. Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Subcommittee reports. Capital improvements. John.
Thank you very much. You'll see on pages 20 and 21 a couple of resolutions. I'm very pleased that our committee is able to be moving forward these resolutions for us to get back to doing capital projects. what we've all been anxious to do for a few years here. So if you would take a look at the first one, resolution to establish a project budget for the South University Streetscape Project. The highlights. Oh, did we get? Oh, I'm sorry. I need to move the resolution.
There's your support. John, support.
Thank you. Yeah, so, thank you. Sorry, I got excited. So, some of the highlights of this are, many of you will remember our retreats that we did in January and April, and where we prioritized projects. So this is the first of the 4 projects looking to move forward. The South U project was designated as the first streetscape project to move forward. And the focus in this case is mainly on the sidewalks, on the street experience, of looking at new sidewalks, reworking landscaping planters, and those sorts of things. So it's a relatively straightforward project for being our first project, to kind of get our feet under our feet. Feet under the ground is not a good.
Not good.
That's not good. So those are sort of the highlights. Obviously, folks have any questions, concerns?
A couple questions perhaps for Susan.
Yeah.
Susan, it might be helpful, I know it'll be helpful for me, if not right now, because I realize it's probably a lot of information, we're already at 1:45, but perhaps at a future time you can share with the board the success or the outcomes, or at least the status of past streetscape projects.
Okay.
I know there are several that are mentioned in our DDA development plan as an example. And then my second question is the streetscapes. John mentioned that in some ways, or I believe John mentioned, but from my knowledge of South U, in some ways this is really more of a maintenance project, because we have those gigantic planters, and there's some other changes that South University would like to see. This project is consistent with the goals of our downtown development plan, correct?
Yes.
And specifically this project, as the other streetscape projects have been, are in compliance with our downtown plan, correct?
Yes. What our plan speaks to in the amended plan, we set out a number of project areas that we thought we would tackle. But in the strategies that underlie them, we also remain flexible. So not every specific capital improvements project was called out, but the goals are very clear and why we're meeting them. South U is a maintenance project. It was a DDA project. We were in there in the early 90s, and some of the problems that we're going back in now to fix were of our making. So an example are
changes in people's expectations or uses, perhaps, rather than problem.
But I'd look to things like the trees are now busting through the sidewalk. The pavers are popping, and we have whatever choices we made, our grading was really insufficient. So there are places on the sidewalk, because its grading is so pitched, they become skating rinks because the drains have since clogged up. And whatever equipment was designed around it to suck out and clean those out don't exist anymore, so city staff can't clean the drains. So much of what we're doing there is a maintenance project. We're calling it capital improvements, but the sidewalk and the trees have to be dealt with. And it's a little bit like the light poles on Main Street. I can't imagine sidewalks on South U remaining unwalkable. We have to get at it. And that's really what the plan speaks to.
Thank you.
I'd suggest one thing about it, though, is although it's pretty simple in the elements, I think that, and using the planters as an example, they're designed in such a way that people use them for seating, they're facing out. Well, in this day and age, we may want to look at facing people inwards and trying to kind of increase the time that people stay there. If you notice, people are always just flying back and forth. So even if we can get the students to hang out and start doing interesting things, that could activate the street and make it more interesting for everyone. So not using extravagant elements, just simple principles that we now understand better than we may have understood them 20 years ago.
Also, some of these things I think in concept were great, but what we learned with those planters is that people sit in them and then they throw their trash behind them. And so they actually are just big trash receptacles, unfortunately, and that can't help the trees, I assume. I'm not an expert, but I just assume throwing trash in, on there doesn't help.
Well, they seem to be growing pretty well.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Maybe that's the secret concoction. But then that ends up being just an overall maintenance issue in general, and then that's tough for businesses.
And I would mention that over 20 years ago, sidewalks were used very differently in downtowns than they are now. Cafe dining was virtually unheard of, and now it's everywhere. Just one of the changes in the way we use our streets that I think we need to address.
So I will maybe prepare a memo for the group. I think it would be useful. We documented the impact of the last streetscape we did, which was the 5th and Division project. And in fact, we received a merit award last year from IDA for it. Because what we did was we said it's not just pretty bricks, it's what happens as a result of the work that you do. And we can document the number of new businesses that moved in, and the businesses then also can help us document what the foot traffic increases were on the east to west movement along Liberty Street. So I'll write something up and give us a sense of impact. Again, it's not just pretty bricks. What we're trying to do is meet our overall goal, which is to encourage private reinvestment and to strengthen the downtown. And I think our most recent streetscape will give us an illustration of what we're striving for with these upcoming projects.
Thank you. Other discussion? And I should point out this sets a total project budget of $1.5 million for the project. Okay, go ahead and vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Resolution passes.
Great. Second one, I would like to move a resolution to approve a design team for the South University and 5th and Detroit Street projects.
Support from John.
Obviously, as many of you know, we've gone through a fairly painstaking process of selecting consultants for this project. There was an RFQ that was put out, an RFQ request for qualification, so it's looking for the highest qualified folks to work on the project. We received 6 responses, which we're pleased that we got that many. The committee narrowed it down to 2 firms that we asked to come in and interview. And based on that interview session, there was a unanimous support for hiring the Smith Group JJR for these projects, 2 projects. The scope of services is we're still working on it. You'll see a copy in there. We'll refine it further. We've been just in this last couple of days back and forth with it, so it will be fully vetted with Susan Amber and myself. Make sure we get the scope of services right, because that obviously affects dollars and fees, and we want to make sure we're focused on that. As far as the fees, fee at this point is approximately $150,000. We're looking for a design contingency of $25,000. Those are for things that are unforeseen at this point. As an example, if we need testing, if we need soil borings, if we need things that are outside the scope of the typical consultant's work, or if we change the scope in some way, obviously the design professionals need to be compensated. So that is to say that the total we're looking for authorization is $175,000.
Yeah.
We're trying to move this along as quickly as possible because we want to take advantage of the good weather and get the consultants out on the street, talking to real people and getting input and so forth. So that's why we're pushing this along quickly. I don't know that I have a lot else to say. We have the contract go to the finance committee for final vetting. So we do have our belts and suspenders approach to how we're kind of wrapping this into putting a bow on it. So at this point, any questions or concerns?
I would point out that the resolution is approving the design team that will be used both for Carytown and the South U area, but the design fee is just for the South U area. We are not at the point of determining what the design fee would be for the Carytown area.
Thank you. My only question is whether, I guess for Rishi, whether this
Does that fit within the budget that we set for the design project?
Yes, this, if I recall, this is within that budget.
Good, great grant.
Any other discussion?
I guess I just have a question about the second to last result about pre-authorizing $5,000 for the contract. Could you sort of give me an idea of how that's working?
Yeah, so what this is once we know who we're working with, we're gonna, as was said, the scope is essentially done, but we want to take one more look at it because we were just doing it over the last couple days. This would give us some small amount of money that we would authorize JDR Smith Group, mostly to get to work with the Red Wagon meet and greets on the sidewalk in Southview, talk to people while there's still a lot of activity on the sidewalk. We're also saying it might be used for survey work as well. But we assume that the contract will go forward to finance in about 3 weeks. This will cover their activity for about 3 weeks. It's a not to exceed. We have their hourly wage. We know what they're asked to do, but it would come out of the total. It gives us authorization to spend money even before the contract is officially signed.
Okay. But again, this work could be used by somebody else if this contract works.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Really, what we're doing could be used by anybody, because it's really helping us to set the stage of what will become the design. Yeah.
I believe they'll have ample opportunity to observe activity on Southview the next 2 weekends, too. Sorry. All right, any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Terrific. So obviously, now that we have consultants on board, the activities with the committee will start shifting more in terms of relating to what the next things are that are needed by the consultant and for the consultant. So we'll be working on that in the near future to set that agenda for that next meeting. Next committee meeting, October 21st at 11 a.m. I'd like to point out, Susan suggested that we may want to be flexible with our dates and times for our meetings because we have a fairly tight schedule we need the consultants to move along on, and the input they need from us isn't always on a perfectly scheduled 4-week interval, so we may land up trying to shift meetings a little bit just so we can keep the ball moving. Just want to make people aware to keep an eye out for any changes in meeting times and dates.
Thanks, John. Okay. Next, Operations Committee, John Split and Keith Orr.
The parking TDM study, Nelson Nygaard was in town last week meeting with some stakeholders and looking at our parking operations. And their existing conditions document should be done shortly. That's the first step in the study. In your packet, on page, starting on page 22 is the September parking report. And I assume that everybody has read through this, and if there are any questions, please ask them. Okay, seeing none. The parking system operating income statement is on page 24. We primarily use this as a way to see the way that parking revenue and expenses are spread across the system. This report does not contain all of the expenses within the system. Our administrative costs and our yearly maintenance costs are not here, but we use this as just a way to sort of look at the parking structures that are have a positive cash flow at this point, supporting the new parking structures that are still having large bond payments. And it just gives us an idea of how the revenue is used across the system. Does anyone have any questions on that?
I don't have a question, but just a compliment to John and Keith and staff for the thoroughness of the information that's available to the board and to the public regarding the operations of the parking system and the information from Republic Parking. Thank you.
We had a discussion at our board meeting. It has been brought to us the idea of changing the name of the Ann Ashley parking structure to the Carytown parking structure. And we talked about that a bit, batted it around, and we will continue to talk about it. Do you have anything that you would like to add?
I do. Staff was asked to do two things. One, bring it to the marketing task force, and also to talk about this with the O'Neills, because many of us may not realize what the name is, a licensed name. I had the chance to do both things yesterday. So Andrew O'Neill was there. He said he was going to bring the question back to the owners of the business, of the O'Neill business. So we will hear back from them if it's possible. They have allowed the name Carytown to be used. For instance, the Carytown Concert House is an allowed use, but they have also challenged others who have used the name but not gone to them for permission. So we'll hear back and report back.
Thank you. We also had some memos presented to the committee. We were asking some questions about our parking system purchase procedures, and that memo is on page 25, and also asking some questions about the Republic parking contract with DDA, and so we also received a memo on that, and again I thank staff, Joe particularly, for doing the work on those things. I found them to be very helpful, and I'm sure they will lead to some other questions. We also, after the meeting, Catherine B. from Republic Parking, who is currently, or is she still currently our interim general manager, currently running the Ann Arbor system until a new person is in place, was at the meeting and went over her auditing experience, both here and in other Republic Parking locations. And she sent us a memo after the meeting summarizing some of the audits she's done here, both on a regular basis and on other occasions. So that's on page 30. Again, I thank her for doing that. Does anybody have any questions about the memos? Okay. Moving on, the 101 North Main request for parking contract. We voted last board meeting on a contract with 101 North Main. Mr. Broder, who came to us originally with the request, came back to us.
Not to.
Excuse me, did I say did we vote to approve it? Excuse me. Yes, we definitely voted not to approve it. Thank you. I misspoke. Mr. Broder came back requesting again that we take another look at it. We didn't, as a committee, we felt like there was no new information there, and we will not be taking the matter up again. Fourth one, construction updates. We just had a meeting this morning. The steel work from phase one, which means essentially the staircase and roof, will be done tomorrow. They had to take something out and put it back in, but the block between phase one and the elevators that will be put in are just being installed now. Glass curtain wall, handrails are the next step in phase one. We were given a completion date of phase one a couple of more months out. So we are still anticipating finishing next fall, maybe a little bit later next fall than we originally anticipated. The contractor is still finding ways to make up some time in the schedule, and we're optimistic they're going to be able to do that. Any questions on that one?
No. I'm going to do a nasty thing, and I'm going to go back and ask a question about the parking report. The thing that, when you mentioned general manager, this reminded me that it struck me as unusual anyway that the person suggested to take over as general manager, the highlight was the background of airport systems, and it sort of, to me, begs a question of, college town. It seems a lot different than an airport. So I'm curious if anyone knows anything more that they could kind of.
Would you like to hear from Brian Kern from Republic Parking?
Yeah, I would. Would folks be okay with that?
Brian, remind us all who you are.
Brian Kern, I'm the Vice President of Republic. David actually has 35 years of experience in parking. What we have listed here is actually part of it. He actually has run urban locations. He was up in Rochester, Minnesota for several years, which Susan obviously is aware of. And that was before the last company with the airport. Before that, he was also in Kansas City running urban operations. He's got a tremendous amount of experience with construction projects. He's ran huge operations, a lot more employees than what we have here. He has a tremendous amount of union experience, which is what I was looking for. And he's a little bit older, which is what I was looking for, because I thought that would bring me a little bit more stability to the operation.
Tremendous. Thank you.
Well,
It's comforting.
I think you'll like it.
Good. Appreciate it.
Moving on, structure repairs. The exterior work at Forest will be completed this week. Work at 4th and Washington is underway, and it includes coating on the ramps. I'm reading this. And concrete repair replacement work is continuing at Ann Ashley. And any other questions regarding repairs? Jada? Nothing? All right. Keith, you have nothing this time around? Okay, so our next operations committee is Wednesday, October 28th at 11 a.m.
Okay, next, Finance Committee. Marie?
Oh, I'm last.
You're not. That's the second page.
So the staff lets us know that the DDA's annual audit is now complete and being printed. The auditor will attend the October Finance Committee so we can discuss the audit at that time. And it will be shared with the board at the November meeting. And that's it.
Okay. Next meeting is
Tuesday, October 27th at 1 o'clock.
Okay. Thank you. Set the record for the shortest report so far. Okay. Next, on this next page, Partnerships and Economic Development Committee.
Do you want to do it?
Sure. Updates from our wonderful partners, WCC. This will be their 50th anniversary. They will have special events throughout the year. And they will be presenting an operating millage renewal, which may be on the ballot next August, which is in the year 2016. City Council updates, shared concerns. The state has recently made bicycle pubs legal, which I think there was a test run of one recently.
I saw one.
You saw one?
Yeah.
Did anyone more than see it?
No, I saw one going across Huron Street. It's very slow.
They're very
It
slow.
might be going 5 miles an hour.
For those of you who like to work for your...
Especially uphill.
Yeah. Nobody goes that fast uphill.
Yeah.
May go backwards uphill.
It's how much you've had to drink.
So yes, council is seeking input from especially downtown businesses. They will be framing some sort of ordinance or guidance to guide, regulate, or ban these bike pubs. So
I believe they're BYOB currently.
I think they're just really heavy bicycles right now.
Oh,
Yes.
really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, you can do whatever you want on them,
I
but
see.
currently they're basically big heavy bicycles. But there will be some sort of guidance formulated, and that's what they're seeking input for from all of us.
Al, I have if we put all Al Williams on these, how fast would it go?
I'm interested in your cloning procedure. Your cloning procedure first and foremost. Yes, it's still very slow. There would be a lot of drinking. Planning Commission will be reviewing the site plan for the Argus Market expansion. They have submitted a plan, as well as the proposed hotel at Glen and Ann. So those are things on the Planning Commission's table. As a committee, we reviewed a preliminary grant policy procedures document. The draft is in the board pack that you have in your hands. You don't need to do it right now, but your feedback would be very helpful. We want everybody to take a look at that. Discussion will continue at the October meeting, and we will have, or hopefully have, a final recommended version to the board in November, at the November board meeting. So that means the input would be wonderful prior to our October meeting, which is next week, the 14th, at 9 in the morning, which is a change. So show up at noon, or at 11. We won't be here, hopefully. And there is no partnerships meeting in November, so just October, but October's going to be a good one. So good. Do you have anything to add, John? There is no meeting in November.
Because it fell on Veterans Day, the real Veterans Day.
Right, and then there's a bunch of other stuff in November also that's hard to schedule around, such as
Black Friday.
holidays,
Oh, okay.
shopping.
Cyber Monday.
Okay, thank you. Next, Executive Committee. Now we'll give a report. Executive Committee met before this meeting today, and we discussed the agenda, and I think that's about all we discussed. Next meeting is Wednesday, November 4th at 11 a.m. Okay. Any new business? Steve?
I don't know if it's new business, and I apologize in advance to our executive director if I'm putting her on the spot, but there is the joint planning meeting, I believe is the precise term.
I forgot to mention that, thank you.
You're welcome.
We have, by contract, as part of our running of the parking system, an annual work session with City Council, neglectful of not including it. It will be this Monday, 7 o'clock, council chambers. We will give the council an update on our parking system, and it's a chance for us to engage with them about any questions they have, any updates about the system. So I welcome everybody to be there. Again, 7 o'clock, City Council chambers.
Have to engage on pedal pubs or other items.
Or cloning on the glimpse.
Yeah.
That's true.
Actually, for what it's worth about pedal pubs, I spent around time in Traverse City, and there's a 14-person one there that moves around. It looks like, I haven't been on it, but it looks like a blast.
How fast can you get it going?
It can
Yeah.
cruise. Yeah, but it would be a good place to, if folks haven't done it, to check into what you think of them. They've got some history now.
Okay. Right, any other new business?
So, not new, I should probably have done this with DDA member notes, but Ray's flyer reminded me, I thought it'd be cool to mention that there's a downtown business celebrating 100 years of business this year, and it's Mo's Sport Shop, which I am partial to, but we built a little microsite, 100years.mo, to check out the history of Mo's. Back, a lot of cool fast facts and a timeline and a video and stuff like that. And Ray actually was a huge help to me in knocking on the door of Bentley and who to talk to and stuff like that. So thanks to Ray, for his help, and check it out. It's really neat, and it's really cool to have a business that's 100 years old still kicking in the same location on North University.
What country is the .mo top level?
So I was trying to figure out what the top level of .mo was for. Like, there's like .pizza, which makes sense, and .ninja. But I don't know if just like guys named Mo really got together and was like,
so
we should have our
not MO.
Yeah, sorry,
Okay.
MOE, yes, .mo.
I thought there's got to be a .mo, right?
Arabia.
Missouri.
Right, yes, when states have theirs.
Yeah, so I was pretty stoked when I found that was a real extension. So
Right, shares a birth year with my mother.
awesome. There you go, 1915.
Wow.
Yeah.
So.
My mother did celebrate her 100th birthday this year, so. I think she's going for 105 next.
Great.
All right, any other new business? Any audience participation? Ed?
Hi, my name is Edward Biletti. 2 or 3 comments, depending on how you count them. One is to bring to the attention of this board a couple of buildings downtown that have come in front of various city boards and commissions in particular the Building Board of Appeals and the Historic District Commission. One is 111 South Main Street, the building on South Main that has a tree growing out of its roof, and the Ann Arbor News recently did a story about the mold and decay that's extensive inside the building. The second is at 212 South State Street, which would not be a familiar address. It's behind Saba's. It's the old Abernathy clay factory, which was a garage before then and is now in ruins. And that is somewhere bouncing between the Building Board of Appeals and the Historic District Commission to look at a demolition order for the property to clear it out and make it less dangerous. So that's, you know, two prime bits of downtown real estate that the DDA should have on its radar as being something that need to have municipal attention to make sure that they head in the right direction. The second is more of a request than anything else. I see a lot of maps on the walls behind me, and I know there's maps on the DDA website, which I'm thankful for. I've been doing some work with some data from the county, which has an extensive GIS database that's available, and I would encourage the DDA in general that as it produces and acquires maps to be in a position to share whatever those sorts of maps are, not only in pretty PDF formats, but also as shape files, so that people can reconstruct that map along with some other layers to make a new map that helped make sense of the downtown. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak? See none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Against adjournment.